Madam President, this amendment I'm introducing with Senator McCain as my lead co-sponsor and a strong bipartisan group of co-sponsors, including Senator Reid of Rhode Island, Senator Snowe, Senator Schumer, Senator Inhofe, Senator Dodd, Senator Hutchinson, Senator Collins, Senator Kyle, and Senator Cornyn. And I'm very grateful for that support. To state it briefly and then to go into some detail, this amendment would remove funding from this bill that was added by way of amendment in the Armed Services Committee, $439 million to build a second engine for the Joint Strike Fighter plane. And I will argue on behalf of the amendment I've introduced with Senator McCain and others that this is a waste of $439 million to buy a second engine for a plane that we don't need. In fact, estimates are that continuing the acquisition of this second engine will cost over $6 billion of taxpayer money that we don't need to spend because there has been a competition for the engine to be used in the Joint Strike Fighter, which is now the heart and soul of America's hopes for the future when it comes to tactical aviation, particularly after the Senate terminated the F-22 program the other day. So there was a competition to build the engine for the Joint Strike Fighter. General Electric, in its proposal, lost that competition. Pratt & Whitney won that competition. And now, by way of legislation, the proponents of the second engine for this plane are trying to achieve by legislation what they could not achieve by competition. And it is not only that it is, excuse me, an unnecessary expenditure of $439 million in the coming year and more than $6 billion for a second engine for a plane that we don't need that second engine. It has consequences. It's not just that we're spending taxpayer money, but I will go into this in some detail in a moment, but building that second engine, putting that money to use on that second engine, a general from the Air Force overseeing this program, Joint Strike Fighter program, told our committee would delay the Joint Strike Fighter, which our services are desperately waiting for. They need this tactical fighter. So it would delay the program. And in fact, this general, Air Force general, testified to our committee that putting money into the bill for the second engine and continuing to fund it would result over the next 5 years in a reduced capacity to build Joint Strike Fighters by 53 planes. So to spend the money to build a second engine for a plane when we don't need a second engine because the first one won the competition and is performing very well, we're going to reduce the buy of this tactical fighter that our military needs by 53 planes over the next 5 years. And how do my friends who support the second engine pay for it? Well, in this Armed Services Committee bill, which is before us, which Senator McCain and I and others are trying to remove, they defund the acquisition of helicopters, Huey helicopters, that are desperately needed by our Marines, particularly those fighting in Afghanistan. There will be an alternative proposal made today, this morning, in the amendment I gather that Senator Bayh will introduce, I presume because there's been so much protest to defunding this acquisition of helicopters the Marines need in battle in Afghanistan in order to pay for a second engine unnecessary for the Joint Strike Fighter. So instead, the amendment will defund the acquisition of C-130s that are specially fitted for our special operation forces, again, carrying out extremely dangerous, critical missions, Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places where they are courageously taking on, particularly the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11. That's the essence of the argument. This second engine is a program that President Obama has described, and I quote, as an unnecessary defense program that does nothing to keep us safe, but rather prevents us from spending money on what does keep us safe, end quote from the President. And that warning from President Obama about the consequences of funding the second engine for the Joint Strike Fighter is realized already in the part of the bill that Senator McCain and I and others are trying to withdraw, and in the amendment my friend from Indiana will introduce, because it takes money from the Marines and the Air Force Special Operations community in areas that they and we desperately need. I want to add that this morning I was grateful and honored to receive a letter from Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, in which the Secretary of Defense strongly and clearly expresses his opposition to the alternate engine, the second engine, the unnecessary engine, the $6 billion unnecessary engine for the Joint Strike Fighter, and his support for the amendment that Senator McCain and I and others have introduced. Madam President, I'd ask unanimous consent that the letter from Secretary Gates be printed in the record.
Without objection.
I thank the Chair. Madam President, I want to read now from the letter. It's only 3 paragraphs. It's a letter written to me. The Department of Defense supports striking from legislation any provision that would require the development or procurement of an alternate propulsion system for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. The current engine is performing well with more than 11,000 test hours. In addition, the risks associated with a single engine provider are manageable, as evidenced by the performance of the F-22 and FA-18E and F, both Air Force and Navy programs supplied by a single engine provider. The Air Force currently has several fleets that operate on a single engine source. So I draw back from the letter. What is unusual is to have a second engine, quite logically. If we went to buy a car, it would be nice to have a second engine in the garage, but would we pay the extra money for it when we knew we had a perfectly good engine in the car we were buying? I return to Secretary Gates' letter. Thus, further expenditures on a second engine are unnecessary and will likely impede the progress of the overall F-35 program. It is my belief, Secretary Gates says, that the Joint Strike Fighter program presented in the President's budget request is in the best interest of national security. If a final bill is presented to the President containing provisions that would seriously disrupt the F-35 program, the President's senior advisors will recommend that the President veto the bill.